Hello and welcome to the Equipping the Saints radio talk show. This is your host, Apostle Marcus Becton, and it's certainly an honor and a privilege to have you tune in with us on today's broadcast. Today, I am at the Sarahs Refuge Domestic Violence and Rape Crisis Center in the city of Warsaw, North Carolina. And I'm here to sit down with the staff of this crisis center to talk about the issue of domestic violence. According to statistics, 1 out of 4 women will experience in their lifetime some form of domestic violence. And that is an alarming rate and a scary statistic. To be honest with you. And so today we're here to talk with these ladies, and I have the pleasure of having sitting around me, around this table, the round table today, Miss Victoria Gray Allen, who is the executive director, Miss Martha Becton, who is the shelter manager, and Miss Shavonia West, who is the community educator and outreach coordinator. And I feel very honored that to be allowed to be here today on this premises, and I feel honored that these ladies took out time to sit down and talk with us about this very serious issue that is taking place in our communities, in our counties, all over this world. People are experiencing this issue of domestic violence, and we're going to learn more about this issue, and we're going to learn what these ladies, as well as numerous other shelters all over the United States, are meeting demand and the need of this thing of domestic violence. So first, thank you ladies for allowing me to be here, and thank you ladies for taking the time out to be a part of this show. So welcome to the Equipping the Saints radio talk show.
It's our pleasure.
Domestic violence, and this is the issue that we're going to be dealing with on today. Domestic violence is a very cruel and very serious issue that affects many, many people. And we want to talk about that today to just really find out what these ladies do here at Sarahs Refuge, as well as the issue as a whole. And so first of all, we just want to talk about, first of all, what is domestic violence?
Ms. West, educate.
But domestic violence is a pattern of abuse from one intimate partner to another. Domestic violence is not only physical violence, it is psychological, mental, and verbal abuse. Mm-hmm. And it is a pattern of behavior that is used to control the other partner. Mm-hmm. That is basically what domestic violence is.
That's it. Thank you. She just summed it up.
She just summed it up. Very good. Now, what are there more than one type of domestic violence?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
yes. As Ms. West said, there is physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, mental abuse, financial abuse.
Wow.
Oh, yes, there is financial abuse.
Okay.
So it's any perceived threat.
Okay.
Any perceived threat, and it could be the threat of your finances, the threat of your body, the threat of your emotional state, your mental state. Any perceived threat is considered an abuse. It's considered domestic violence.
Wow. Okay. That's very very broad. Now, what role does Sarahs Refuge? What role do you guys play as sitting down talking? I understand that you do reach out to the community. We have the community coordinator here. You do reach out to the community to, I'm assuming, educate people. What avenues do you do as far as with education? Where do you go? Who do you talk to? How do you do that?
Before Ms. West starts, gets into what she actually does in the community, let's first backtrack a little bit to what our goal, goal and the vision, the mission and the vision of Sarahs Refuge, which will highlight what she does. Our mission and our vision, it's almost one. Is to eradicate all forms of domestic and sexual violence in Duplin County. Would we forsake the surrounding counties? Absolutely not. But let's start from the home front. Right. So, and hopefully it will spill out. And with that mission, with that vision, it propels her into what she does.
Okay.
So what I do is I actually visit the local businesses here in Duplin County. I network with human resource workers from the Port Company, Murphy Brown, House of Rayford, the Piggly Wiggly, Vidant Duplin Medical Center, the Health Department. And what I do is I go in and I actually talk to the staff and do in-service trainings on domestic violence, how to spot a victim, or how to basically know a person that is going through domestic violence, and how basically they can help. So when I talk to them about the services that we provide, I also let them know how we can help if they come across a victim, whether it be a client or a coworker. And that's one aspect. I go into those businesses, but then I go into the schools and I talk to the staff at the schools, and then I also do what we call lunch and learns, where I set up a booth at lunchtime and I pass out educational and awareness materials to the students and to the staff on teen dating violence, sexual assault, domestic violence, how to talk to different people if you are experiencing domestic violence at home, whether it be yourself or your parents. And then basically I also educate the students on the services that Sarahs Refuge have, so that they'll know how to get in contact with someone in the case if they find themselves in a situation, such as abuse, sexual assault, or domestic violence.
Okay.
Let me piggyback a little bit on that. With eradicating domestic and sexual violence in Duplin County, to break that cycle, as you said, preventative work is a lot of what we do.
Okay.
And it starts with the kids. If we have any hope, any shot of breaking the cycle, it's with the kids. Let them not repeat what they see at home.
Okay.
One of the reasons also she works with the children a lot, especially in the Latina community. Mom and dad, or mom, who is the victim, at home speaks little to no English.
Okay.
So if we educate the kids, if we provide the information to the children in the school, they themselves take it home to mom. Mom, guess what? Here is help for us. Here is help for us. I go into the schools myself, and I do what is called a parent-teacher forum.
Okay.
And what I do is I provide information to the parents and to the teachers, so the teachers themselves can identify a child who is living with domestic violence. A lot of times our classrooms, our schools are filled with special ed programs. And a lot of those kids in special ed are not necessarily candidates for special education.
Okay.
They don't have a learning disability. What they have is a frightening situation at home. So if you have a child at home who is not sleeping because daddy is beating mommy all night, who is not eating because if mom is a victim of domestic violence, half the time there's very little or no food in that house. And this child is here sitting probably in dead of winter, 7 degrees, not appropriately dressed, didn't eat any breakfast, and is sitting at home thinking, am I going to go home and mom is going to be alive? That child is not going to learn. So therefore, now this child is classified as a child with a learning disability. So what I do is I go into the schools and I educate the teachers on how to identify a child who is living with domestic violence.
Wow. Wow. So is it safe to say, I know as far as victim is concerned, there is no age group that hit a victim hit his
absolutely
face.
no.
But do you see, and we're going to touch on this a little bit later on, but do you also see, as far as I would assume the person that's doing the violence, I would assume we would call them the predator, or
Right, the abuser.
The abuser. Do you see a certain age group as far as the abusers are concerned, or is
No.
that kind of vast
No.
over as well?
No.
Wow.
It has no age. It has no age limitation, no color barrier, no socioeconomic
Okay.
barrier. It has no gender barrier. Oh, we have male victims also.
Okay.
So it has no gender barrier.
Wow.
It doesn't matter.
Wow. That's amazing.
It is.
That's amazing. And I salute you ladies for the work that you're doing, and I like that your intended goal is, as you said, to eradicate this here. And of course, if you don't know where Warsaw is, they're in Duplin County, North Carolina, and so this Sarahs Refuge. Now, what is the most common? And I know there are various types of abuse, but that you've dealt with, what is kind of the most common type of violence? Do you really see?
Psychological.
Wow.
Breaking the victim down from the inside out.
Wow.
Psychological. If you can get a victim, if you can get a man or a woman to believe that they're nothing, that I am the reason you're surviving, I am the reason you eat, I am the reason you exist.
Wow.
It's the worst place. It's worse than physical abuse.
Wow.
It's absolutely worse than physical abuse. Because you've taken that person's identity. You've taken their worth, their esteem, their value. You've taken it and crushed it.
Wow.
And now after a while, they too believe that they're nothing. So when you see those victims come in, they cannot look at you because they're nothing.
Wow.
So how dare they look at someone who is something? They will never, ever look at you.
Okay.
Their heads are always down because they're nothing.
Okay. So the abuser gets basically
Absolutely.
into their head.
Yes.
And
Yes.
Wow, that's
Yes.
amazing. Now, again, I salute you ladies for what you're doing, because I know it's probably not an easy task.
No, it's not.
At all, because I'm sure getting the information out there probably is somewhat easier than actually the next stage of your process, which is, I would consider, the aftercare, or actually taking possession whenever someone comes. So this is what I want you to talk about. Kind of take us through the process after a person, male or female, have gone pretty much as far as they can go, and they have just taken all that they can take from being abused, and they want out or they want some help. What is the process once the phone rings or they show up here at the facility and say, listen, I've been abused, whether I've got the scars or not? What is the process that starts from there? Once they come in or once they contact you, what happens there? Take us through that process.
I'm glad you said whether there is scars or not, because most people think, I shouldn't say most, let me not generalize it like that, but there's a large percentage of the population that believes if I have no scars, I'm not abused.
Oh, wow.
And that is such a misconception. That's a myth. It is such a myth. It's like a woman will report to the police officer, I've been strangled, and the police officer will say, no, she's not, because there's no marks. She has no marks on her neck. But the lack of marks does not mean she was not strangled.
Right.
Maybe if you pull back her lips, you'll see the broken capillaries, behind her lips. You'll see it in her gum. Could be in her eyes. Did you stop to ask, did you pee on yourself? A lot of strangulation victims will pee on themselves. They don't ask those questions. Well, because she doesn't have a mark. And a lot of times victims who are strangled, the marks don't come up the same day.
Okay. Right.
It'll come up the next day or the day after. So I'm glad you pointed that out. So the phone rings, and a victim calls and says, I need some help. The screening process is a very compassionate one. And the screening process is not just to collect data. It's to figure out where this victim is mentally. It is never what we want to do for the victims. It's always what the victim needs us to do. People often think we're in charge. We're doing the leading, but it's not so. It's to approach that victim right where they are. Because the phone will ring and they don't want to come into the shelter. They just want the abuse stopped. They don't know how. I don't want shelter life, but I want the abuse stopped.
Gotcha.
So the phone will ring, and the screening process, again, is one of compassion. It's about gathering information to see how best we can help this person. How do we keep this person safe? So we have a very thorough screening process. If the victim says, I want to come into the shelter, we assess the situation through our screening and our shelter intake. and we give them directions to the office.
Okay.
No one is ever directed to the shelter.
Okay. Very good.
They're directed within business hours. They're directed here.
Mm-hmm.
After business hours, they're directed to the police department,
Okay.
and the police accompanies them to the shelter.
To the shelter.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Very good. So then they are deemed, if they're deemed to stay in the shelter.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that you have children
Oh yes.
Yes.
that come along with mom.
Oh yes.
Or vice versa. So are there a time limit? Are there what is that process once they get into the shelter?
Mm-hmm.
What is dad or the abuser just sought out and arrested, or are there help for him or her as well as abuser side of things, or do you just focus mainly on the one that has been abused?
Okay. The first couple of days, of course, Martha, our shelter manager, we have a phenomenal residential program,
Okay.
and the team that works there. Martha is the shelter manager. She's there from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Then from 4 to 12, we have the evening shelter advocate. And from 12 to 8 a.m., we have the overnight hotline coordinator who works from the shelter, because after 6 p.m., the lines from the offices roll to the shelter.
Okay.
The first couple of days is we allow mom to breathe.
Okay.
If there are children, we allow them to breathe, because the children may not have been hit, but they're secondary victims.
Okay.
They saw the abuse. So, we allow them to breathe. When a woman wakes up the next day and say, I'm homeless, you have to deal with that before you can deal with anything else.
Wow.
People often think because a woman has left her abusive husband or a man has left his abusive wife means they no longer the love stops. It doesn't. It doesn't. It really doesn't. So you're dealing with a victim who feels, I still love this person. I just don't love what he's doing to me and my children. And look where I am. The first few days in the shelter, we allow them to breathe, become acclimated, because it's a program. And with programs, there are rules. There are, I don't want to call them rules, they're guidelines. And the guidelines are set to keep the victim, the children, and the staff safe. That's what the guidelines are there for. They're curfews. And sometimes you get older women with their families, with their children, and they've never had a curfew. Now they're in a building where there's a curfew. The curfew, again, it's not to restrict their behaviors or restrict their activities or say, we're going to control what you do. The curfew is there to keep you safe. Because when you walked out of that house, the abuser didn't just say, okay, she's gone, I'm going to stop. He's looking for you. He's actively looking. Abuse is about control. His control, the person he's controlling, is gone. He needs that back. So he's going to be actively looking for you. So the curfew is not there to restrict the victim's activities. It's to keep them safe. That's what it's there for. Our shelter staff, we work very, very intensely with the victims. When they're ready to move forward, we have counseling, support groups, individual one-on-one, emotional support is offered through the staff. You may have a victim that says after a month, I want to go back to work. I want to work. I've always wanted to work, but he never allowed me to work. Because her earning any kind of income is going to afford her a level of independence that he cannot afford. He does not want that. So the victim may say, I want to work. You may have a victim that says, I want to go to school. I want to learn something. Finding that some of them want, after they leave the shelter, they want to go into their own apartment. We work with that. But in all of what we do, the support groups, the individual counseling, sometimes we have victims who the psychological abuse is so bad that mental health services is needed. We make those referrals. And we transport, if they don't have any vehicle, we transport them to Tar Heel or New Dimensions. Mental health services need especially the children.
Okay.
Especially the children, because after a while, when you see the kids in the shelter, they start to exhibit the same aggressive behavior that they saw dad exhibit towards mom. So we know these kids need some help. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow. Now, are there and I heard you mention a second ago about sometimes mom may be there for a month. So there is no real, is there any time limitation?
Yes.
Okay.
There's a 90-day stay.
Okay.
90 days.
Okay.
And sometimes an extension of 45 days is afforded to the client.
Mm-hmm.
It's not afforded to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Say we have a client who, after the 90 days, there is an apartment for her.
Mm-hmm.
She's already signed the lease. It's confirmed. We got something from the building management, but the apartment is not yet ready for mom to move in.
Okay.
Or if we see that mom is actively working towards finding somewhere, a 45-day extension will be extended. But it's not extended to everybody.
Okay. Just a sidebar, and our time is winding down. But just a sidebar, as far as with the shelter, and Martha May can answer this somewhat. With the shelter, I'm sure there are times that there may be mom or I'm assuming you keep, as far as the men and the women are concerned, if you have men that come in there, and most men probably would just receive the abuse and not even tell anyone, but
because of the stigma.
Because of the stigma. But I'm sure that you do have men that come, but now I'm assuming the men are not kept at the shelter.
We do not house men.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we do not house men.
Okay.
We house women and children.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, but do you ever experience any times where a mom or female is admitted in, and after a day or so just decide, listen, I don't want this help, I want out?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay. Now, are they in that, even in that process, are they just freely allowed to go?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
They're not mandated to stay there. It's a voluntary program.
Okay.
They're not mandated to stay there.
Okay. Very good.
And sometimes that's all they need. Sometimes that is all they need. They just need to get away from the abuse. We never say you need to stay. No. Or you need to not go back to him. No.
Okay.
Wherever the victim is at, that's where we're working with them.
Okay.
As I shared with you earlier, from the moment the phone rings, that power is given back to the victim.
Okay.
So if you choose to stay with the abuser, when we do the safety plan, our whole goal is to keep you safe inside that house.
Okay.
So the safety plan, the individualized, that's the operative word. It is structured to keep that victim and children, if there are children involved, safe.
Right.
If they choose to leave, the safety plan is to keep them safe while they're gone. So it's always where the victim is at, what do they want to do. You ask if, say they come in the shelter and do we have him arrested? Sometimes the victims don't want that.
Okay.
They don't want to take out a order of protection. They don't want to go to court. They don't want none of that. And we trust them. They've lived with this abuser. A victim will tell us, if I take out the order for protection, it's going to aggravate him even more. And that piece of paper will not keep me safe.
Wow. Wow.
We trust them. They live with this person. And we'll have victims that says, yes, I want to order protection, I want to go to court, I want to prosecute, I want to see him behind bars. And that's done. But you'll have victims that says, no, I just want to leave. I just want the abuse to stop. I want to leave. I don't want to push him. I don't want to aggravate him. I don't want to order protection. I don't want to go to court. I don't want none of that. They just want safety.
Wow.
That's all.
Wow. That's
Wow.
amazing. Well, ladies and gentlemen, our time has come to an end for today's broadcast. And I certainly hope that the information that you have received thus far from these ladies has been a blessing and somewhat of an eye-opener to you as you learn more and about this issue of domestic violence. Now, even though our time is up, we shall further this discussion, and next week on the show we shall finish talking about this issue of domestic violence, and we shall continue it with these ladies. But I just like to thank Miss Victoria and Miss Martha and also Miss Shavonia for your input on the program thus far. And it has certainly been a tremendous blessing and a tremendous help to myself as well as to the listeners. I know who are tuning in on today and will be tuning in into the broadcast. And so you don't want to miss it. We shall continue on next week. And please, thank you so much for tuning in, and do come back to get the second part of this series on domestic violence. Until next week, thank you again for tuning in to the Equipping the Saints radio talk show, and please consider yourself have been equipped. Till next week, shalom.